Cops of Reddit, what has so far been the creepiest call you've ever had to respond to and what happened? It was a stormy night on the Oregon coast. A lady was driving drunk and ran into the back of a parked school bus. When she did, her car caught on fire, but she was able to escape. When I found her slowly walking down a side street, I was telling her to stop and turn around. When she turned around, her lower jaw was gone, and she was totally dazed. Her tongue was sticking straight out the top of her neck, and she was trying to talk. She ended up surviving but needed tons of plastic surgery. Yikes, this one is awful and would have been so creepy to see in person. Not me but my firefighter EMT father. Standard car accident call on a busy highway in the area. I-75 if you're curious. Dad goes up to the car. Things trashed. Teenage driver, around 20. Head partially cut in half. Eyeballs hanging out. Clearly a DOA. Now my dad had seen some crap. Grandma accidentally backing over her 3-year-old granddaughter. So this disturbed him. But he was numb to it. However, it hit home when he got off shift. Literally hit home. Turns out the kid was the son of our next door neighbor. We barely knew the guy, who came over and asked if my dad had been on the call and then proceeded to break into tears on our front porch. He asked my dad if there was evidence of him suffering or dying slowly, to which my dad said no. It was true but he would have said that regardless. After consoling him, he went back to his house. We still keep up with him now, especially on the death's anniversary, when he apparently get a kind of depressed according to live-in relatives we also talk to. Not a cop but my dad's friend is and got totally hammered at our house a few days ago and told us about one of his first rough calls was a little girl who had came to school with hair missing from her head and apparently her dad abused her and ripped it from her head. Who knows how and why, and so police got involved and when the parents didn't come to school they went to the house and found the mom so badly bloodied and with both eyes so swollen she couldn't see out of them. Her daughter couldn't even recognize her. Dad had apparently not wanted her to go to school because he knew teachers would get suspicious but mom sent her anyways. He woke up in the morning and found out she had sent her and just went apeshit on her. Dad had locked himself in his room upstairs. Sucker jumped out the window and made it pretty far until he ran into a K9 unit and tried to make a run for it and the K9 tore his legs to shreds. Never been so happy to hear the butthole got what he deserved. Not a happy ending for the girl though. Update. While this blew up a bit, my little sister goes to school with a girl and there was assemblies at school to raise awareness for domestic and child abuse. She is still in care of her mom and it turns out she's pretty normal. It's just that her dad evolved into deep alcoholism and is pleading guilty for several different charges. How can you try to run from a K9 unit? Military police officer. So I worked both law enforcement and corrections for a bit. In corrections the main office was also the police services desk. Often it would ring and no one would be at the other end. Anyways one time it rang and instead of a number it had a descriptor that I don't remember exactly. Something like emergency phone 11. I was new and immediately called my superiors about it. They told me to drop it and never report anything like that again. Ominous, right? Anyways the reason I told that is to tell this. Some time later, on patrol I got dispatched to essentially an abandoned side of the base to respond to an emergency phone call. No location at first because radio didn't know where emergency phone 11 was and was new to the base so he didn't get the same memo to not report those calls. Radio then went on to say that the caller had sounded frantic and thought they were being chased, meaning that someone had actually been on the other end. Radio eventually digs up some old maps that label the emergency radio 11 location and relays them to me and my partner so we drive there in a hurry. There is no phone, just a broken pole where one had once been. That was a fun one to report. This immediately made me think there's some room underground with a phone connected to those old emergency phone lines, and someone was locked away, tried to escape, found the phone, and was ignored. That's messed up. Man, this was probably 2010, 2011. I was really new. Call came as an unknown problem. Basically the 911 was so freaked up, even dispatch didn't know what to call it. Turned it this guy had just murdered his stepfather and then walked to his grandparents' house to kill them as well. He stabbed his grandmother through the eye with a Rambo-style Bowie knife, one that had the compass in the pommel of the handle. He missed her brain by about 1/8 of an inch. so she did not die. Instead she came running out of the house when we got there, knife sticking out of her freaking eye, and the compass was spinning around because she was moving. My brain literally went, that's not real, and I went past her, along with several other cops, before the sergeant was like, what in the actual frick are you guys doing? She survived. We caught the guy in a stroke of pure luck. Elderly woman with a massive hunting knife for an eye. Definitely the creepiest thing I can remember seeing. Working third shift on Halloween night. I'm out by one of our smaller lakes just outside the city limits. Kids love to go out and drink, which is surrounded by some very nice houses. Going through the neighborhood, each of the roads ends at a small 2-lane road that surrounds the lake. I'm slowing to the stop sign and already starting to look to my right to make the turn when my headlights start tracing the rock wall that surrounds the lake. I catch something out of the corner of my eye in one of the large trees that dots the walk path. I back up to see what it was and I see a guy hanging. At first I thought it was a Halloween decoration. The neighborhood is really into decorating for every holiday, so I stop, get out, and as soon as my flashlight hits him I realize, nope, no decoration, he dead. As I'm standing there getting ready to call it in, I notice a gaggle of kids coming down the street trick-or-treating. Crap. As soon as they see my car they start heading my way faster, so I book it back up the block to meet the parent walking with them and tell her she needs to take the long way around the block the other way. She can see it on my face, I'm not kidding. Turns out he was a 20-year-old that was devastated about his girlfriend breaking up with him, and she lived in the last house on that block where she would see him the next morning when she looked out her window. Okay, that ending. What the frick? I once went to a 2-fatality car crash. The cars had collided head-on in a 55-mile-per-hour zone. One of the drivers had left the house suicidal, and it was surmised that he picked a car out at random and went straight into it. I had spoken with that man several weeks prior, and seeing his skeleton in the burned up car was a little creepy. I won't describe the rest of the scene, but the worst part of it is, this was Christmas Day, not a Merry Christmas at all. It's one thing to want to take your own life, but how dare you take someone else with you? My uncle was a sergeant and had to be called several times out to a house for domestic abuse. This older guy had some young 18-year-old. He would pay for the guy to swallow certain objects like paper clips and human hair. The kid would poop it out into a bag and the older guy would sift through the feces like a goddamn treasure hunt for the items. He would then put them in an envelope and file them. The domestic abuse had nothing to do with the poo treasure hunt. I don't think it's illegal, just super creepy. This one may win as creepy. UK got called to assist ambulance at an address because they were struggling with a woman who'd had an apparent seizure. We got there and she's this tiny skinny little Singaporean lady who's being held down on the floor by a paramedic. She's hissing and struggling against her and repeatedly trying to bite the paramedic. Her eyes are all black and red, no white. It takes me 200 lb, my partner for the evening, 180 lb, plus 3 paramedics to hold her down. All the time she's struggling and trying to bite with veins popping out of her neck. She's looking past us at the corner of the room screaming at something that isn't there, telling it not to kill her and us. Her husband, who seems weirdly unfazed by the whole thing, tells us this has been happening since she last went to Singapore and got sick after visiting a holy site. Usually her sister has to stop it by putting this powder on her forehead in a cross, but unfortunately she's out of the country. In the end she was taken to hospital for a mental health assessment by the paramedics. I often wonder what the outcome was but have no way of finding out, unfortunately. That's the kind of thing my immigrant Christian parents attribute to demons. I've heard similar stories. Honestly not sure what to make of it. Not a cop myself, but my dad is, and I asked him this one time. He told me it was when he went to this one house because a woman had called and said that men were breaking into the house. He gets there and he said it was immediately very clear that the woman was not exactly all together mentally. He said she kept mumbling things and was very jumpy and skittish. Not to mention that every single wall of her house apparently had at least 6 or 7 crosses on it, if not more. He calms her down, checks around the house for any signs of entry or just anything weird, and there's absolutely nothing that would indicate that anyone had been trying to or had been successful in breaking in. He said she followed him around the entire time and would point to things, like a doorknob or window latches, and say, "Oh, that's not where I left it. That's how they got in." He said the whole thing was fairly eerie, considering he was at this woman's house in the middle of the night, surrounded by crosses and listening to her mumble on about random crap. To make her feel better, he did a sweep of the whole house to see if there was anyone else inside, which there wasn't. He said the one thing that made it creepy for him was the fact that every few minutes she'd say something like, "Oh, they're here again," or "He's right behind us, I can feel it." Sounds like schizophrenia to me. My cousin is on in a major city. Apparently 911 got a call from a 6-year-old claiming vehemently that there was a zombie outside of his house on the street. So a patrol car swings around to see what's up. Turns out a tweaker on him gouged out his own eyes, had blood dripping down from the empty sockets, and was stumbling around blindly with his hands stretched out in front of him. Goddamn. Turns out the kid was telling the truth. This is why I don't do drugs. Not a cop, but a correctional officer in Texas. One time a guy slit the forearm side of his elbows, where it bends. He laid there in a big puddle of his own blood. I was one of the responders that day. I'll never forget it. As soon as you entered the cell, the smell just hit you. Blood has a strong metallic smell, which I never realized before. He'd been laying there a while, so the blood had coagulated, which again, I did not expect. As we lifted the barely conscious guy out of the blood fell off his body in chunks, like jello. It was pretty disturbing because I didn't expect any of it, nor was I able to mentally prepare for it. We're not really medically trained, so all of it was completely surprising to me. God dang, that sounds weird as frick. I didn't know blood did that either. Obligatory not a cop, but my dad was. When I was around 2 years old, my dad and his partner at the time got a case where this 2-year-old daughter had died as the result of being left to cook in a car. Just so happened my dad's partner called off sick the day of the autopsy, and so my dad had to be the one to go and watch. Says it is easily one of the most haunting images he's had in his career since I was that kid's age. Sounds like something my friend had to experience, being called to babysitter forgot the 2-year-old in the car for like 3 hours in the middle of an Arizona summer, 120 degrees Fahrenheit outside. My father-in-law is sitting beside me, so I asked him. He is a retired sheriff and was a deputy before that. He was the first responder to an accident. A truckload of farm workers were coming back from the fields. The truck went over a hump in an intersection and a little girl in the back of the truck flew out and landed headfirst on the pavement. My Phil held her as she moaned and eventually died in his arms. He says he still hears her sounds in his head all these years later. Oh god, this reminds me of my uncle's story. He dealt with traffic accidents, and one time he was called out to this one accident where a convertible had flipped over and slid. The mental image haunts me to this day. Got a call that someone wasn't answering their phone or the doorbell. We got to the house and noticed that every window was blinded by either curtains or pieces of paper. We rang the doorbell and yelled through the letterbox, but there was no answer. We opened the door and got inside. In the house it looked like someone just had lunch. There was bread on the table and juice or milk in the glasses. Children's toys scattered all around. Then I saw a note that gave me the chills. It was a suicide note. As the door was locked from the inside, the person had to be in the house. We checked room by room and my heartbeat was at 300% when I checked the bathroom. Preparing myself for slit wrists or throats, I opened the door slowly, but there was nothing. Finally one more room left, which was the attic. We walked slowly up the stairs and we found the resident there, hanging from a beam. I will never forget the adrenaline I had, the scene in the living room or the resident I found. My mom was a patrolman at the time and rolled up on a guy fricking a pumpkin on someone's front porch. It was one of those huge ones like 3 foot diameter. Guy was apparently too into it to notice her and her partner roll up him. Unrelated, a year later she got a call for a suspicious person, and so she's walking around in the woods behind a neighborhood and heard someone sneaking around, so she hid behind a tree and tripped the person. It was a guy in full ninja regalia carrying a wooden box with shuriken, poison darts, throwing knives, and a picture of one of the girls in that neighborhood. She also found a butterfly knife in her HSP. Well, it Marizo fell out when she was being frisked. Grandmother's story. Retired homicide detective. Couple call police because they are missing their baby. Grandmother and partner show up to investigate the house. It's just the husband, wife, newborn and dog that reportedly live there. Husband is angry and wife is visibly shook. Understandable. They are missing their child. My grandmother's partner find bits of blood near crib, as well as more blood near the doghouse outside. After pressing the couple, mainly the wife, they come to find out that in a fit of rage from not getting any sleep from the baby crying, husband picks the newborn up and smacks him against the wall repeatedly until the baby stops crying. They didn't know what to do, so they fed the now bludgeoned baby to their German Shepherd. My grandma has seen some crap. What in the actual frick is wrong with people? Not me, but my cousin. He got a call one night that two brothers, ages 4 and 6, were found dead in a near empty swimming pool. There was like 6-8 inches of water in the pool and the call came from their dad. They never could charge the man, but it is widely believed that he killed his 2 sons. We responded to a burglary alarm at a mortuary and found that one of the rear doors was left open. Policy now dictates that the entire building needs to be cleared, searched, to confirm that it was a false alarm, which most are. It's the middle of the night and totally dark. We use flashlights and never turn on lights. We walk into one of the rooms and see a body on a table. It appeared that it was waiting to be processed, possibly embalmed, by the mortician. It smelled like a mildly decomposing body. Suddenly I see a shadow to my right and I shine my light there and find nothing out of the ordinary. I immediately smell a really strong whiff of perfume blow by me. The search was completed more expeditiously than normal after that. Nothing was found. From my post 8 months ago. Got a call for a missing child. Got to the home to find the mother highly distressed and not sure what to do. I called in everyone to first search the home and property. I decided to search the backyard since it was a large wooded lot with no visible fence. After about 10 minutes I found a boy. He was caught on an old chain link fence in the woods that was blocked by a bunch of trees, so you couldn't see it from the house. He had basically gotten strangled to death on the fence. He must have been climbing on it, fell, and got his hooded sweatshirt caught on it. The worst part for me was having to call it in on the radio, knowing the mother might hear it inside from one of the other officers' radio. Christmas morning 2004. The police station received an odd call from another station 600 km away, saying that a young man in his late teens had handed himself over to them, claiming that he had shot his grandmother the night before, and drove all the way to the coast, Johannesburg to Durban. I was the detective on call that day, and since there was no immediate police van in the area, me and my partner had to go check it out. When we got to the address we found a locked house with no answer. Knowing it might have been a prank call, I started walking around the house looking for an open window or some kind of evidence to support the call, not wanting to blindly break down a door based on a phone call alone. So I managed to pry open a bedroom window, and what I saw inside gives me chills still today. It happened to be the master bedroom, and there inside, looking right up at me, was a bloodied face with big, bewildered eyes. Broke down the door and found the lady in her bed, still alive. She had been shot in the head the day before by her grandson who was living with her, and somehow managed to not die and instead just lie there helpless. Her bedroom TV blaring in a foreign tongue. She was a French immigrant. The whole house reeked due to her soiling herself, and while waiting for the ambulance to arrive I used some of her perfume to spray the room so I could do my investigation. But that just made it worse. The smell of crap and perfume fused to form a smell that I would never forget. It was a common perfume, and from that day on it was hard being around anyone wearing it. It would trigger the accompanying crap smell, which in turn would conjure those eyes pleading for help through the bedroom window. She died later that week in the hospital, and the grandson was charged with murder. He had shot her with a .22, stolen the neighbor's car, and made his way to Durban. On his way there, being overcome with guilt, he decided to hand himself over. Boy, did I have an interesting story to tell the family at Christmas dinner. I was in the academy and doing a ride along with my sheriff's office for experience. We were just finishing up dinner when a call went out for a Signal 7 death on the local interstate. Scene was less than 2 miles from where we were. Roll over to the scene and the local PD is there, looking at the gigantic light pole that had brain matter on it from the impact of the car, which had split in half. I walk up beside PD and ask where the Signal 7 is. Look down. Less than 6 inches from my feet is the driver of the vehicle laying in 8 inches of weeds with his head split open like a tomato. Death reconstruction and eyewitness accounts indicate that the young man was driving at a high rate of speed, 75-80 miles per hour in the right lane of a 3-lane northbound interstate. Got distracted by talking on the phone, and overcorrected when he drifted into the middle lane. Overcorrection resulted in his vehicle losing traction, striking a light pole with an 8-foot diameter. Lights are mounted about 150 feet up, around the driver's side B pillar between front and rear door. Car was split in half with the driver's head being wedged between the kinetic energy of the still moving vehicle and the stationary resistance of the light pole as the car was split. His head looked like a tomato in a vice. The two halves of the car went approximately 500 feet down the road, in 45-degree opposite directions, and his flip cell phone was found about 200 feet from his body, still open and working. Caller had hung up. I wonder if the line at the other end knew what had happened or if the call had dropped on impact. My dad was a Chicago cop in the 60s, early 70s, and 2 stories stick out. One creepy, one just butthole puckering. Creepy. He and his partner get a call from neighbors to a frequent flyer domestic dispute at a rundown apartment building. They arrive and, of course, the lights aren't working the stairwell. They head up to the apartment and, when they get there, they open the cracked door and the kitchen looks like a horror movie. Blood everywhere, surrounding one very obviously dead guy in the middle. Countless stab wounds, slit throat. He used the phrase, "It looked like a bear had ripped the guy's neck apart." A quick check of the lack of pulse and clear of the apartment later. They walk out and see bloody footprints heading further up the stairs. Head up, turn a corner and see the woman standing on the next landing, covered in blood, holding the knife at chest level, point up in front of her face and just staring blankly at them. She was basically catatonic until they transferred her to the mental ward, after which his interaction with her stopped. Pucker factor. He and his partner worked New Year's Eve and were assigned to the hospital. They were standing outside in a trailer that had been set up for outreach, just casually chatting away, when a bullet blinked through the roof of the place and landed between the two of them. They decided then was a good time to go hang out with their friend the pathologist, who was working in the basement morgue. Better to be hanging out with dead guys than be a customer. Not sure if other define it as creepy, but my father responded to a call, on-call firefight paramedic, to an attempted suicide. When they arrived they found the dude, who had attempted to hang himself using barbed wire from the nearby fencing, thinking it would be more effective. It instead degloved his face from the chin up. Freaking heck. Firefighter here. Creepiest thing I ever saw was responding to a suicide. We pulled up on scene at her old house and I instantly saw the guy. He was sitting in a chair under the open garage with half a head and a lever action rifle in his hands, still pointed at his head. The creepiest part of it was when we found the spent casing on the ground and realized there was a live round in the chamber. Somehow he shot most of his head off and managed to shuck another round in the chamber, in what I can only imagine a vain attempt to end his suffering quicker. Still bothers me to this day. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.